It's such an honor to have you both here in this space with us. Rewatching the film on the big screen, the immediacy of your performances, I think, is the gravitational core of the film. And so now we have you immediately in person, so thank you. To start off with, I want to ask you both about your initial reactions to the project, how you became involved, what drew you to these characters, this story. Ethan, you, of course, have a long-standing friendship and relationship as collaborators with Richard Linklater. And I wonder if you could just kick things off by telling us a bit about your initial conversations with him about this project, what your sort of respective visions of this interpretation of Lorenz Hart.
Yeah, I'll take off from there. It's funny, Rick and I met, I think, 1992. He came to see me in a play, actually. He wasn't coming to see me, he was coming to see one of the actors in Dazed and Confused, Anthony Rapp, a wonderful actor, was in the play. One of my close friends that I'd started a theater company with was the writer of the play, and Anthony had given us, he invited us to watch a rough cut of Dazed and Confused. So a couple weeks before, I'd seen Dazed and Confused, right? And I had felt that there was a great injustice in the universe when I watched this movie, because I was supposed to be in that movie. I'm watching the whole thing, I'm like, this movie sucks, because I'm supposed to be in it. I just felt so simpatico with the film. I know a lot of people do, everybody loves that movie, but the combination of having seen Slacker a couple years earlier and seeing this, and I was like, all right. And you know what it's like backstage. Anthony's like, yeah, my friend Richard Linklater's coming to see the movie. I'm like, coming to see the play. And I'm like, oh, is he? Interesting. And so he came to see the play, and afterwards we all went out we went to the Corner Bistro, I remember, and Rick and I talked till about 4. We shut the place down just talking. And it does feel like sometimes 30 years have passed and we've just kept talking. That's what our friendship feels like. And so this script, when first sent to me, wasn't even really a script. He was friends with the writer Robert Kaplow, and Robert Kaplow had sent him what I would call a document. It was almost like a short story told in dialogue. It was just imagining Lorenz Hart on the opening night of Oklahoma, which to both Rick and I seemed like such a brilliant idea for a film. Of like, wow, what if you could be there that night? And so Rick had just sent me this doc. He's like, what is this? What should I tell Robert? Robert was just looking for feedback. And I was like, you should tell him we're gonna make this movie. And Rick said, I thought that's what you'd say. You know, like, I think we could do it. And so he started talking to Robert and saying, hey, let's put this as a screenplay form. Let's work on this. And we did a reading. This is a really long answer. And we did a reading, and we just started every 18 months, 2 years, sometimes 3 years, sometimes revisiting this document that slowly evolved into a screenplay. And then finally we were like, all right, or we weren't. I always thought it was ready. Rick felt it was ready. He's a very patient man and very discerning mind, which is two words that don't apply to me, discerning and patient. But and then it was on.
And Andrew, turning to you, I'm curious also about how you came on board the project and whether you were familiar with the story of Rodgers and Hart and the character of Richard Rodgers as a sort of cultural history figure, or if the screenplay was kind of a way in for you.
I knew him as an artist, and Rodgers and Hart and Rodgers and Hammerstein. And I just YouTubed him a little bit when I got the script, which was sort of strangely unhelpful at the time, because I think the big challenge is something that me and Ethan talked about endlessly, was just how you establish this incredibly intense friendship and connection in a very, very unusual atmosphere where the central plot for Richard Rodgers that evening does not involve Larry. It involves the opening of what has become one of the most renowned musicals of all time. You know, like, that's what he's thinking about. But so his plot isn't the same as the plot this movie. And so how do we form that, and how do we choreograph it, and how do we make that dance and make the music of it? And that's what our conversations were about, weren't they?
You both, to a large extent, built your careers and established yourselves as performers in the theater and have done a great deal of work in the theater. And this is, of course, a film about musical theater in many senses, not least just superficially. But it also feels, in a sort of structural level, like a work of theater. In some ways, it's set in one location. It's very, very so much of the action is actually dialogue, is actually conversation, is speech acts between people who know each other to varying degrees. And yet it's also very much a work of cinema, and the way in which the camera relates to the characters that you're playing is fundamental to the film, which is something that, of course, theater doesn't share with cinema. And so I'm curious if you could just both speak perhaps a little bit about how, perhaps in general, the different ways that you might approach theatrical acting versus cinematic acting, but specifically in this very particular kind of fusion of the two contexts.
Can I jump off first? It's one of the things that's amazing about being friends with Richard Linklater is how profound and deep his respect and love of the history of cinema is. And he's a great teacher about it, and he's a great lover of it. He runs the Austin Film Society, and he is obsessed with the form and what the form is doing. And early on in his career, he started understanding that dialogue is a tool of the theater that could be used differently in cinema, in that it didn't need to be abandoned for cinema to have its own, have its own vocabulary, so to speak. And so I've done a lot of movies with him that are extremely dialogue heavy. People said the same thing about, Before Sunrise should be a play. And I'm like, no, yes and no. I know what you mean in that it's character driven and dialogue heavy, but there's something deeply cinematic at work there. Rick's relationship to time is powerful. And I feel when we saw the movie last night at the big theater there at Alice Tully Hall, and watching it, I was like, oh, right, this is a Vincent Minnelli film. That's what this is. He's using some of the techniques of that period. He's using his deeply cinematic mind looking at what is normally a theatrical device, one set and dialogue, but he's using it cinematically in a way that I just find really staggering. A lot of his movies are movies that I remember when I saw Slacker, I thought, I had that idea to make a movie like that. Or Dazed and Confused, you think like, I want to make a movie about when I graduate high school. Or Before Sun, I'll make a movie about when I fell in love. It's kind of, I equate it to like Kerouac, Cassavetes, and Bukowski are responsible for more bad art than any other three greatest artists because they make it look so easy. They make it look like, I'll just write a book about my friends. It'll be great. I'll write a poem about going to the bathroom. It'll be great. And it's not great because Bukowski didn't write it. And Cassavetes makes movies about his wife, and it's amazing. But all of our wives aren't Jenna Rollins, and it's different. But Rick makes these things seem effortless. They just seem easy. It's like, I could have done that. But making a movie in real time at the opening night of Oklahoma is a very small target for that to be cinematic. Do you agree, disagree?
Wholeheartedly disagree with everything you just said. And it's interesting about that question about theater acting and film acting. I still don't really know the answer to that. I suspect there's no real difference. I think some of the most engaging acting you can see on the stage is when somebody is completely still. And I think this idea that they tell young film actors, which is, just don't do anything. I don't know. I've seen some of the best actors, like Ethan's performances. People speak in the most extraordinary ways, and people have the most varying, huge. There's a huge variety of the way people will walk out of this theater. You know, people's physicality is idiosyncratic and extraordinary, and so I think it's just about, you know, the simple thing about just listening, and I think with both things, I don't think you can make a great movie out of a mediocre script, and I don't think you can have a great night in the theater if the play isn't something. So I think that people talk about directors and actors a lot, about the, you know, the relationship between directors and actors, but I think there's a huge thing to be said about the relationship between writers and actors.
I am so glad to have you both here, because I think a part of the magic of the film is the chemistry between your two performances. Lorenz Hart has the line in the film about love stories and friendship stories, and sort of suggests, I think, that friendship stories might be in many ways gnarlier and more specific and more unique or distinctive. And there's so many layers to the sort of dynamic that the two of you establish with your performances that's, you know, of course, building on the existing relationship between these two real men, but just the different emotional registers that you're kind of ping-ponging back and forth between the two of you, vulnerability, guardedness, pain, really like raw frustration or exasperation, sort of perhaps pity or compassion. And I am curious if this sort of synthesis or chemical reaction that we see was something that you talked through and sort of intellectualized, or was this a product of rehearsing and of sort of experimenting with the screenplay?
I think the answer would be all of the above, but I wonder what you think about this. I'll bet anything that Andrew Scott has good chemistry with every actor that he works with. Because I think people love the idea of like, oh, those two people have great chemistry on film, as if it's some magic, intuitive thing. Andrew's a great scene partner. And if you're a great scene partner, meaning you're listening and responding and absorbing what your partner is doing and making space for them to play and taking space for yourself when you need to, inevitably you have good chemistry with good actors have good chemistry with each other. And so I don't think it's some magic thing that just kind of, wow, isn't that? They do these things in auditions. As let's have a chemistry reading. Yes, you know, like as if you're putting two rabbits in the cage. Like, are they going to sleep together? I don't know. And it's like, and it's just over and over again. I find, wow, good actors create the chemistry. Absolutely. You know,
and I think it's so much about enjoyment. I think some actors are ashamed to be actors. And I think that's, I don't know, it's the idea of the seriousness of acting that I find just insanely boring. You know, because the best, you know, it really is something that I say far too much, but I believe it so passionately that you play a part. Our job is to play a part, and the best people that play are children, because they just go, okay, I'm going to do that, blah blah blah, and they have absolutely no embarrassment about it. They're not concerned with knowing everything, which is what we're taught to do. You know, as we become adults, you know, we know everything and blah 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 blah. And I think if you really enjoy acting and you have no shame about being an actor and you love being there, and you think, come on, we'll do it, and then you work hard. Like there's something that I feel really proud of with the scenes between me and Ethan in this, is that we learned the lines really, really, really well, which some actors don't. And then you just run them. So you're not. It's not. It doesn't on the day. I know that I've been on sets where people are avoiding the acting because they can't remember it, and then they sort of go, oh, I think it's because or they hold on to an idea because actually they just can't fully remember because they haven't really done the work. Mercifully, that hasn't happened to me too much, but we were able to be on that doing that stairs scene, and we could have done it lots of different ways, and we enjoyed doing it, and we do it again and again, and then something else takes over. I think something else takes over.
You're kind of hunting together for a wave. that's what it feels like. And you have to learn how to swim, and you have to kind of learn how to surf, and you kind of have to understand where you're supposed to put your feet. And then you do the work, and you go out there, and a wave generally, if the riding is good, a wave will come. And then you just ride it. And it was fun. We could do those takes over and over again, and Richard would be wonderful. Try one, slow it down, slow it down, slow it down. Okay, too slow, too slow. Do one, pace it up, pace it up. And different things would happen. And Rick's smart. He would just watch and watch and watch and start to isolate what it was that he liked best, and then go, this is the area where the wave is going to come.
This is, I think, related to my next question. I'm going to leave time for just a few audience questions, but I have to ask about the element of physicality in especially your performance, Ethan, but also responding to that physicality as a scene partner. I'm, the diminished height, I think, is the most obvious.
Hi. Sorry, we're boring.
Why is this bringing back terrible memories?
This is me. I'm talking too much, so I'll keep it short. But tell me about the process of this physical transformation, both as the performer embodying it and the performer responding to it.
I'll start and say that, like, for me, to do what Andrew's talking about, to play, it really helps if people play with you. I'm going to pretend that the stage is on fire, and the other person goes, "Yo, it's so hot!" And all of a sudden, you're both like vibing off of it, and you're getting ideas off the other one. And there's certain physical things you can do to play tricks in yourself that you're a different person. You wear different kinds of shoes than you would normally wear, and so you start to walk differently. Or I was trying to always remind myself that he had arthritis, and he didn't like to move his shoulder, because if the last line of the movie, I can't put on my coat. And I just was like, all right, I want them to believe that it's hard for him to put on a coat, and so I can't be moving. So all these little things you're doing, and obviously the height, and obviously he's insecure about the way he looks, and he thinks he looks gross, and so the comb over and all that. And then you come to, and you're doing these tricks, and you're like, doing the wardrobe test, and you're like, okay, I believe it, I believe it. And then you walk onto set, and you look in your scene partner's eyes, and do they believe it? Because if they don't, you know. And it's a tear in your sail that you have to try to stitch up or pretend you didn't see, and if they believe it, then the sail goes up and you start having confidence in it. And just right away in rehearsal, Andrew said something to me that just gave me a tremendous amount of confidence. Like, it was like I could tell he thought, oh, this is going to work. And I thought, all right, I think it's going to work too, And he could have done the inverse. He could have stepped on with fear and been like, oh no, this is going to be embarrassing. Why do I have to do scenes with this corn hack,
But it's really, the physical transformation is so extraordinary, and that isn't just, that's felt, that's something that's just within Ethan. I think everybody will agree it's so extraordinary, and it was so, just to watch him do it was so exciting and moving, and he's so open. Ethan is incredibly open and smart, and he's hardworking as well. And obviously, talented. But talent isn't enough. You've got to be. I think you've got to have humility to be able to say, to ask the questions and be bold. Be bold. And this is such a bold performance. That's why it's so affecting, I think.
I'll open it up to the audience. We have time for a couple of questions. I see one hand right there on the side. There's a mic that'll come to you.
Did you all think about the pacing? There were two scenes that gave me such anxiety because I wanted you to go to the party, and he was holding you back from going, and it seemed to be the timing there. There were a couple of seconds where it was like, this is where you go, this is where you go. Yeah. And did you think about that or reshoot it to get just the right timing to make us in the audience feel that?
We were really, really concerned with that idea. I think those nights, you have so many snatched conversations. You're constantly interrupted, particularly if it's a success. People want to come up and congratulate him. So we built those things in, and I felt like I was sort of saying earlier, that his plot is somewhere else. It's where he, who's here, what do people think? It's a huge night for him, and so that just had to be there in order for it to be plausible. So I definitely had to think about that a lot, and Rick was, just incredibly responsive to that.
It was so wonderful. In rehearsal, we came up with the idea of, while I'm pitching him the whole Marco Polo idea of this new musical, that we would just get interrupted at least 3 times, because that's what it's like at opening night parties. You can't ever finish a conversation. And so we kind of built that into the script, and it was so fun, because I'd be sitting there trying to talk to him, and these, extras would be coming up, and even one of my favorite moments is when the mayor of Oklahoma City comes, and I said, and I get to say, "Welcome to New York. We'll be finished shortly."
Yeah.
I see one hand right here, and the mic will come down to you. There you go.
Oh, great. The baby Sondheim cameo, really crucial, and then made me think about Richard's other movie that he's working on, Merrily We Roll Along, and was the mirroring of, 2 writers that their artistic collaboration and their friendship are sort of falling apart concurrently. Was that ever discussed on set? Was that anything that you were talking about? Were you listening to Franklin Shepherding in the dressing room, or?
It came up in that, Rick is from Huntsville, Texas. I mean, he's such an odd person to be in love with musical theater. You just somehow don't think of the director of Slacker as being really, but he's a great lover of other arts. And I feel I'm partly responsible for fanning this flame, because Rick's always coming to New York to see me in plays and everything. And I'll tell you all that I was at one of these opening, might have been a New York Film Festival thing or something, where Before Sunset had premiered, and Rick wasn't there. And I got to meet Sondheim. And Sondheim bullied me to a corner. All he wanted to do was ask about the rehearsal process of Before Sunset. He really wanted to know how we rehearsed, and what were the techniques, and how was that script written. And he just couldn't understand it. I said, well, you've got to meet Richard Linklater. And they did meet, and then that turned into, for those that don't know, Linklater's making a movie of Merrily We Roll Along, and he's taking 20 years to shoot it. It's really a wild endeavor. I'm not kidding. He's going to be 83 when it wraps. And so Sondheim has become a part of Rick's lexicon for whatever, and I think he really wished that Mr. Sondheim was alive to see this. It would have been a little gift to him.
I love the idea that Stephen Sondheim asked that question. I think it's just so. I think it's so telling about, the way we talk about people who are geniuses, that they are somehow all-knowing. And that's what I mean about if you have talent, but that you have the humility to go, how do you do that? So you're constantly learning, and you don't stop when you go into this sort of utopian field when you won one Tony and you think, okay, well, now I know everything. You're constantly asking. And that's what one of our big challenges in playing these 2 brilliant people, that they're concerned. They're concerned about work, and they're talking about work, and he's enchanted by Dick is enchanted by Larry's story before the mayor comes and interrupts them, and they're nearly swept away into a creative hole and a creative bubble, and then something happens to destroy that. And I think that's a really interesting. It's a really interesting idea in the nature of genius people.
Do we have time for one more audience question? I think we can take one more question. I'll take one from this side of the room. I see one hand right here. The mic will come from this side.
The anticipation counts.
It was too much.
Better be good.
It was too much. I just thank you guys for being here. I've really enjoyed this whole thing. My question, I guess, is for Ethan. I know Hart's is a real character, but it felt like maybe a lot of lifetime of observation and people, and I mean, there's a lot of monologues, so I'm wondering if the character parts mean something like bigger outside of this story for you, I guess.
I love it when a movie is about real people, but it wouldn't matter. These people could be called Jim and Dave, and the film would work. It's an interesting story, and you don't need to get these references. It's kind of fun to get the references, but that's not what's interesting. It's the human elements, the jealousy, the feeling that you're being left behind, watching a friendship break up, watching somebody mask this great pain. It's almost, his love affair with Elizabeth is almost like self-cutting. He's creating an injury so he doesn't have to deal with the real injury. And so those things are deeply human, and those things, I grew up in the theater. That's my education. That's men like Larry Hart were my role models and mentors through my whole development. And so I saw Larry as them, as the generation before me, and I wanted to play it. Those are the people. I was in rehearsal rooms from 14, to 35. That's really like where I was really doing the most of my learning, was all from these amazing mentors that I had. But listen, thank you guys for being here.
Thank you both so much, and
Absolute
thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.